Wish you could become a morning person? You know the type, up before the sun, early morning runs, first one to the office with donuts and a smile. How do they do it? Easy. With the new Galaxy Watch 8, sleep tracking and personalized insights from Samsung Health help you improve so you can wake up to a whole new you. One who, dare I say it, skips the snooze? It's possible. Train your sleep with Galaxy Watch 8. Learn more at Samsung.com. Requires compatible Samsung Galaxy phone, Samsung Health app, and Samsung account.
This podcast is brought to you by Carvana. Carvana makes car selling fast and easy from start to finish. Enter your license plate or VIN and get a real offer in seconds, down to the penny. If you accept, Carvana will come pick up your car from your driveway. Or you can drop it off at one of our car vending machines. Either way, you get paid instantly. It's fast, transparent, and 100% online. Car selling that saves your time. That's Carvana.
Carvana.
Pickup fees may apply.
A message from McAfee. Wondering why the post office is texting you or why you owe thousands of dollars in toll fees? Because someone's trying to scam you. The good news? McAfee can help. With McAfee's award-winning scam detection, it's easy to tell what's real and what's fake over text, in your inbox, and online. If they're
You want a free gift?
Seriously? If they're faking it, they're not making it past us. Get award-winning scam detection today. McAfee.com/keepitreal.
It seems that the center of our politics right now is international trade. It's most of what we talk about in this country. Hello and welcome to the Full Comment Podcast. I'm Brian Lilly, your host, and coming to you today from the sidelines of the Banff Forum. Not inside the Banff Forum, because that's a special session that happens, and it's, of course, Chatham House rules. It's my first time here, really enjoying it, but two distinguished people have agreed to join me for a discussion about international trade, people that know an awful lot about it. Ed Fast served as International Trade Minister in Stephen Harper's government. He's also with the Institute for Research on Public Policy, where he serves on the board, a strategist at Sussex Group Strategy, and where else did you... Macdonald Laurier Institute Senior Fellow. Louise Blaise, also with me, and she is a former ambassador for Canada, diplomat that worked on trade files for years, works alongside groups like the Canada-U.S Business Council, and both of them so knowledgeable. So thank you so much. Let me start with you, Louise, because you're in the States all the time. I know you just came back. What is the feeling down there towards Canada? Because right now, you talk to Americans that come here, and all they say is they feel nothing but anti-Americanism.
Yes, it's true. I mean, when we go down, I spend quite a bit of time in Washington. I spend quite a bit of time speaking with Republicans and lawmakers and people close to the White House. And what strikes me is that there's more optimism about the renewal of USMCA than we have in Canada. They're all saying, look, it was a bipartisan agreement. It was Donald Trump's agreement. It'll get renewed. It may be modified in certain parts. There may be things that will have to be looked over, but in their mind is something that's working. Many provisions in there they're very happy about, but there are a few things that they don't think have been respected or implemented in the right fashion or in the way that they had intended. So they want to revisit history a little bit. But having said that, some of them are aware of the hurt and the negative feeling in Canada towards some of the measures that have been taken and some of the things that their president has said. Others a little bit less are surprised that Canada is this upset. And what they keep telling us is that, look, yes, it's too bad. Some things have been said, but at the end of the day, you're our partner. You'll continue to be our partner. We'll get through this. That's what they say.
Ed, do you get the sense that perhaps Canadians took things too personally in the beginning and acted, overreacted? Or do you think that the way that we have reacted as a country is understandable, given what Donald Trump said, given the quick and harsh changes to the trading relationship?
Well, it's easy to be armchair quarterbacks and second guess our leadership in Ottawa. What I would say is that as Canadians, we have to be very careful that as we engage with the U.S. in the lead up to the renegotiation of our free trade agreement, and as we try to negotiate away some of the tariffs that have already been levied against us, let's make sure we don't bite off our nose to spite our face. Because simply imposing retaliatory tariffs means that we're actually penalizing Canadians. It's Canadians that will pay the cost of those tariffs because those tariffs have to be absorbed by business. Business is not willing to absorb those for the most part. So we're the ones that would pay for a retaliatory approach to the United States. What I would say is this. A renegotiation of CUSMA, our trade agreement, represents some significant peril to Canada because within that narrow negotiation, we have very few, if any, cards to play. Now, we've already seen that American Ambassador Pete Hoekstra has discreetly signaled that the Americans have said, let's do a bigger deal, a broader deal that would bring into the discussion the waterfront of outstanding issues between Canada and the U.S. And there are many, but they're not necessarily encompassed within a narrow trade negotiation. And he seemed to indicate as well that somehow those efforts to broaden out the negotiation had been rebuffed. So it would concern me if our government has said, nope, we want to do this on a sector-by-sector basis within the framework of CUSMA. Well, then we don't have a lot of cards to play. That places us in a very difficult situation, especially given the asymmetry in our bilateral relationship.
Louise, I see you nodding. When I heard Ambassador Hoekstra make those comments, it kind of surprised me because what I'd been hearing was there was a push to get a very high level, 50,000 foot kind of view deal. And that's what they were talking about at the end of May, beginning of June. And then it was, oh, well, we'll get that deal by Kananaskis in the middle of June. Of course, those things never happened. So what are you hearing on that bigger deal, smaller deal? What are the Americans that you're talking to looking for?
Well, it's interesting because we do seem to be two ships passing in the night. I don't think I'm hearing one thing from the Americans. I'm hearing another thing from the Canadians. So that's very concerning. It means that what are we talking about? And so 1 week to the next, I'm told that the Americans have not made their position clear. And then the next week, I'm hearing from the Americans that they feel that we're not coming to the table with goodwill and a real position of negotiation. So it's a little bit disconcerting to be hearing completely different things. And I think this tells me is that we're not speaking the same language yet. It's taking a long time. It's as if we as Canadians, I have seen us do this, and it's not a criticism of any government in particular, but I have seen we come into the bilateral meeting, we come into the negotiation with our list of things we want to accomplish. We don't come wanting to listen, and we don't listen. And I've seen present company excluded because I never had the pleasure to work directly with you or in bilaterals, Mr. Fast. But I have seen several times where the minister, when we leave the meeting, the minister is saying, oh, that went well. I know very well it didn't go well. And I get the call from the American side that will tell me, what was that? So we have not found, even though we're neighbors, we're really close in many ways. When it comes to speaking about hard issues, we don't seem to connect particularly with Republicans for some reason. And so that's what that tells me. So big deal, small deal. Now I think we're back to the small deal. Whatever, if we were ever in a big deal, I don't know. And now we're being told it's steel, aluminum, maybe auto. Lumber is being pushed aside as being too difficult to a nut to crack, and that we'll get the other stuff. But it's Friday now. We're recording this on Friday after after Thanksgiving weekend. This is almost 2 weeks now since the Prime Minister was back in the Oval Office. We just feel like the momentum is evading us yet again.
I felt like Carney and Trump had a good moment in Egypt at the signing of the peace deal, and that little joke about, oh, thanks for promoting me to president. And Trump said, at least I didn't call you governor. And they had a laugh. And I watched that with interest. And I said, okay, they seem to have a good rapport. I don't think that our teams on the ground have a good rapport, but those two seem to. We've got to use that to crack through. We are, I've been very critical of the ambassador, Ambassador Hillman, not because I don't think she's a smart woman or accomplished woman. I watch her interactions and I say, this is not a diplomat. And then you've got Dominic LeBlanc, who's a salesman. He's a great kind of guy that you need for that. He's going down there all the time. Are we putting the right team in place, Ed? As someone that's been in these trade negotiations before, do we have the right team in place? And this is not I want people to be clear, this is not a partisan criticism of this government, because you might have noted I said, put a big honking liberal named Dominic LeBlanc in charge. I mean, you don't get more liberal than Dom. I just want us to have the right players. What's your sense of having the right players?
Well, let me provide a bit of a counterpoint. As someone who has worked very closely with Ambassador Hillman when she was our chief negotiator on the TPP file, her competence is beyond question.
Oh, yeah, not talking about her competence.
No, let's make sure we're not talking about her competence. I'm not in a position to comment on her diplomatic skills. I found her in negotiations to exercise the highest levels of diplomacy, conventional diplomacy, which I think was sorely lacking over the last 10 years. I think we lost our advantage when it comes to diplomacy. But you asked about the team. They're still putting together the team as we approach the formal commencement of negotiations on CUSMA. That team isn't yet crystallized, and I'm not sure who's going to play a part of it. I know in the past we had some of the best negotiators in the world. One of those was Ambassador Hillman when she was an ambassador. Steve Rahul, another one. There's others that are still there. Marvin Hildebrand, I believe, might still be there. Weldon Epp, individuals within global affairs that direct specific areas of our global reach. I'm confident that we have the resources in Canada to put together a really strong team. But before we do that, we better have a strategy in place. And I am one that is not necessarily in favor of a narrow renegotiation of our trade agreement, because I think that puts us in significant peril. I think we have to broaden out these negotiations so we take advantage of our strengths like critical minerals. We can offer the United States continental defense by collaborating on the Golden Dome. We can collaborate on providing them with an assured supply of things like uranium and things like potash. So before we even get to finalizing what our team looks like, which may be led by Ambassador Hillman, let's make sure we have the right strategy in place that allows us to leverage the assets we can bring to the table in this negotiation.
What are your thoughts on the strategy? Because I think of the last time that we had negotiations. Your thoughts, Louise, on strategy. I think of last time the Americans published their full list of demands for negotiating CUSMA, and it was all about market access, and ours was gendered language. And I thought, okay, we're at a disadvantage from the start here. What should our strategy be going into this? I know you've already talked about large deal, small deal, but what strategy does the team, whoever it is, take into this?
Look, the number one thing that we need to do, and I agree, we have some of the best trade policy people in the world. In fact, when Brexit happened, the UK came after some of our best minds, because we have been negotiating trade deals for decades. I mean, we really have a specialty. And then the last time when NAFTA was renegotiated, the Americans were a little bit on the back foot. Even though Lighthizer was very knowledgeable, the president was not as focused on it, and there was a lot of and really, we did well in that context. This is not that. We are now facing a very well-organized, well-thought-through American position. It's going to be much more difficult to push back on them. They are not, and partially because they are not in the mood. We've not put them in a very good mood, and I will say it doesn't matter who's at the negotiation table. The most important thing at this moment is the relationship between Mark Carney and Donald Trump. And at the end of the day, that's the man who's going to make the decision, is Donald Trump. And I think that is, our strategy has to begin with working on that relationship, and we're coming late to that.
So, I mean, in that context, elbows up and running an election campaign on anti-Americanism doesn't necessarily work. I mean, trust me, they did notice that.
They watch our every move, and so does the president. It's unnerving. He will cite Canadian officials because they bring it to his attention. He's very well aware. And don't forget the other thing that we've done, which I would never have advised any government in Canada to do. We went on the airwaves in the U.S., on Fox News and all the others, to criticize the president. Not just we try to do it nicely, but really at the end of the day, we're basically saying he doesn't know what he's doing. Canada is very important to the United States. This is destructive to the U.S. He watched that. He did not appreciate it. There was an article in the New York Times where I think some things were said by diplomats that shouldn't have been said. And so it's hard to build trust. And he said something when they saw each other last week, Donald Trump to Carney. I don't remember the exact word, but it was sort of like, don't try to be nice now. It was sort of this connotation of, it's not because you're buddy with me now that everything is forgotten. I'm not saying he said that, but you build trust by respecting, by understanding. And I'm told when I'm in DC, and this is not wrong, and we may dislike it, but we're told, know your leverage, critical minerals, all the things you've said, but also know your place. Like, you just have got to understand how to play it. And people say, why can't you do what the UK did? I mean, Republicans are kind of saying, please, we want things to work. We want the relationship to be repaired. I'm not saying that we need to genuflex totally, but at the same time, you just have to understand some of the concerns, and you have to give them merit. When we go around Canada saying that the United States, what they're doing is illegal and improper, and that doesn't raise that kind of background that's going to get us a deal.
My view on treaties is always they're in effect until they're not. And when one side breaks them, they're no longer in effect. So, just yelling that the tariffs are illegal, it doesn't get you anywhere. It might make you feel good. But you mentioned about Carney and Trump seeing each other. And I raised the issue about the Carney going to the signing ceremony. I think that was a good move for him. Now, it was a bit surprising considering that a little while earlier he had been all about let's recognize a Palestinian state unilaterally. And I know some of my colleagues in the media have said, these two things aren't related. And why would you conflate them? Well, here's my view. We're in the middle of trade negotiations with them. Donald Trump's singular focus for the last while has been on getting this peace deal in the Middle East. And then our prime minister goes and undermines him. It's going to annoy him. And doesn't that affect trade negotiations if you're annoying the guy that you're sitting across from?
Oh, perfect segue into what I wanted to say, and that is, you're absolutely right. The relationship with Donald Trump is absolutely critical, and having our prime minister there at the signing ceremony, I think, was a good thing. I don't think we should overstate the value of that. But every time we add another irritant to our bilateral relationship, an irritant that the president takes very personally. Let's start, we've had already a history of this. The digital services tax, the imposition of retaliatory tariffs. On both of this issue, on Kuzma goods. We had to back down on both of those because they were irritants in our bilateral relationship. Now we've taken a step. We've departed from traditional foreign policy to recognize a Palestinian state. Now, quite aside from the merits of that shift in policy, I would suggest the timing was absolutely poor because that Donald Trump and the White House took notice of that. And we got another decision coming up, EV tariffs. Are we going to trade off EV tariffs for access for our canola crops to China? That is a decision Mark Carney is going to have to make very, very soon. And if we depart from our aligned position with the United States on EV imports from China, we're going to get killed. So be strategic in positioning ourselves vis-a-vis a president that can be unpredictable, that takes irritants very personally, is so critical. Let's get this right. And again, it goes back to what is our overarching strategy? And then we deploy our team based on that strategy.
Okay, we have to take a quick break, but when I come back, we have to start talking about irritants on a bigger basis. We'll start with canola, but also the trade irritants that we have. Too many Canadians think that we are pure as the driven snow, and that's not the case. Back in moments.
Oh, the sick day struggle is real. But with Dimetapp, it doesn't have to be. Children's Dimetapp works quickly to soothe multiple bothersome cough, cold, and allergy symptoms in a single dose. Our fast-acting formulas are designed with kids in mind, so they get everything they need and nothing they don't. Available in liquid and on-the-go chewable tablets. Tap the banner now to shop at Amazon and say goodbye to the sick day struggle with Dimetapp. Use as directed.
Once upon a mundane morning, Barb's day got busy without warning. A realtor in need of an open house sign. No, 50 of them, and designed before 9.
My head hurts.
Any mighty tools to help with this plight?
Aha!
Barb made her move. She opened Canva and got in the groove.
Bulk creating Canva sheets. Create 50 signs fit for suburban streets.
Done in a click, all complete.
Sweet!
Now, imagine what your dreams can become when you put imagination to work at canva.com.
Learning through play starts with Lego Duplo. With Lego Duplo, toddlers can develop real-life skills while having fun with colorful bricks made just for them. Large, easy to grip, and safe to explore. When children express themselves with Lego Duplo, they build patience, problem-solving, and empathy. See your child learn perseverance and self-expression with everything they imagine and create. Visit lego.com/preschool to learn more.
This is Tristan Hopper, the host of Canada Did What?, where we unpack the biggest, weirdest, and wildest political moments in Canadian history you thought you knew and tell you what really happened. Stick around at the end of the episode to hear a sample of one of our favorite episodes. If you don't want to stick around, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get podcasts.
So, Louise, I want to pick up with something Ed was just saying, and that's about the canola tariffs. I hear from, my extended family, my in-laws, the canola farmers. They are very annoyed at this. I hear from my friends in Western Canada about this. Your EV industry isn't real. It doesn't exist. We should just get rid of them. And I point out, look, I understand, but if we drop them, do the Americans hit us back with something harder? That's got to be a concern. Donald Trump is not the biggest fan of electric vehicles, but he's really not a fan of China and their trade policy of dumping vehicles at half the price into our market.
Look, as I've said, I mean, on the one hand, we're the luckiest country in the world because we are so far the effective tariff rate on Canada is 3% because of the USMCA compliant. But on the other hand, we're the most exposed to whatever happens. We're in between two big powers, and we have been there before on security, and now we're there on trade. We have a big decision to make, and I think what worries me in all of this is we've got to be really clear-eyed, because the Americans are not going to decouple from China. Okay, the Americans are going to decide to trade with China on goods and services that are not essential or that are not security, don't have a security component. So they're going to reduce on chips, they're going to reduce on certain things, and they've decided to make cars something that for some reason is existential to the American economy and industry. So cars is very important, but they're going to trade commodities that we trade with China. So we have to sit down at the table with the Americans and say, look, we're being squeezed. We cannot afford to completely lose our canola industry. We need to make, you're going to make a deal with China. You're going to be trading things with China. Don't you, because what worries me is that they will steal market share from us, the Americans. They'll make a deal with China, and they to sell the same commodities. We don't grow soybeans in a big way, but there are things that they can provide China that we provide China. And so I think we need, anything we do with China, we have to do it in alignment with the United States. It does not mean it has to be complementary. It doesn't have to be identical. Did we have to go 100% on EV? Did it have to be 100% tariff? Or could we have looked at a middle ground like the EU did? And that's a question mark. But we were really, this was the period where we were big on EVs in Canada. We threw Mexico under the bus at the time. So, because what we kept hearing was that Mexico was the back door for China into USMCA. And this is one of the things that the Americans are still thinking. They don't want USMCA to be the back door for China into their market. And so we have to have an open conversation with them. And I don't think we consulted them on the 100% on EV tariff. I think we just did it because we just thought that that's what they wanted us to do. I think we need to be spending more time aligning, not copying. It doesn't have to be identical how we're going to handle China. And I think that's going to take patience and a lot of diplomacy.
My advice to the canola farmers of Western Canada is, yep, we got to do something to help you out with China, but also China is a bad trading partner. 2013-14, they screwed us over on canola. 2017, they screwed us over on canola. 2020, they banned us for 2 years. It's a big market, but they keep, every time they have an irritant with us, what do they hit? They hit canola and pork. So it's an unreliable partner at best, and we'll see. So let's talk about other irritants, though. Dairy. This is something that you've dealt with other countries. The reason we don't have a trade agreement with the United Kingdom right now is because we refuse to give them the same dairy access that they had under the European trade agreement. People think it's an all or nothing, that we have to either completely protect or completely get rid of supply management. And I'd argue, Ed, that I've never heard an American say you've got to get rid of supply management. What are your thoughts on dairy as an irritant and how we deal with that?
Well, I have a few views on that. The dairy industry has been very effective in Canada, bringing its concerns and advocating for its interests in Ottawa. As you know, there's a law now on the books. It was a private member's bill, which by far the majority of parliamentarians supported, which effectively says supply management will never again be tabled on a negotiating table in our trade negotiations with the United States or any other country in the world. The reality, though, is Donald Trump and his negotiators won't care about that private piece of legislation that's now on the books in Canada. They'll say, you know what? Implementing legislation can cure that. It can deal with that issue. We're going to negotiate, assuming that you have the ability to talk about this. And I have suggested to the supply managed industries that if they're not careful and strategic here, they are facing a very challenging negotiation as these trade negotiations move forward. I believe this time Donald Trump is emboldened. He has the ear of the farm organizations in the United States that don't like supply management. And he wants major changes in how we allow access for dairy, for chicken, for eggs. And I've encouraged our industries to be strategic here, to reimagine what supply management might look like as we enter these negotiations, to make sure that they have a backup plan that might continue to sustain a system of supply management, but address some of the major concerns that the United States has when it comes to access to our dairy, chicken, and egg markets.
Well, in the last CUSMA negotiations, the Americans thought they had negotiated a certain amount of access for industrial milk and cheese, and then we gave the quota to Saputo and Agripur and Armstrong, and they're not importing any of it. So they get nothing, and that was a major trade irritant for the Biden administration and the Trump administration.
And that's the big challenge we have. Over the years, our supply managed sector has manipulated the system that protects them and benefits them in a way that has irritated the United States supremely. Their milk pricing process, how they manage their quotas, as you mentioned. We have to be very, very careful in how we approach these negotiations, because there's an existential threat that exists for those industries. I don't want to overstate it, because with every threat, there's also an opportunity. And I believe the opportunity is for that industry and other industries in Canada to reimagine what life will be like after CUSMA is renegotiated. Because my fear is that eventually our Prime Minister and his government will be presented with an all or nothing deal, where we are told you either have a free trade agreement with the United States and give up this, and this, or you don't. And it'll be that binary choice that will have to be made. And that's where I'm encouraging our industries be really strategic and visionary about where this may land and adapt accordingly. Make sure you have the ear of our negotiators so that they know what some of the additional options might be that they can place on the table and that might actually be more attractive to the American negotiators.
One of the things that I've been hearing, Louise, from other industries is that if supply management pushes us to having no agreement with the United States and a renegotiated CUSMA, that they will all lose it on the dairy industry and throw the dairy industry under the bus. They're willing to, work to protect the industry overall, but not at the cost of them giving up nothing and everyone else losing.
I come back to the premise of your question, Brian, when you said that, finding a middle ground, and you were saying that as well, Ed, about finding a middle ground with the United States does not mean dismantlement of supply management. It doesn't. From what I'm told from the American side, it's exactly what you said. They thought we had agreed to something that in its implementation, we've actually did a bit of a runaround with the concentration of protein, and it gets a bit technical and complicated, but we have not fulfilled, you could argue, the spirit of what we agreed to in USMCA. And I think, and I go back to what you said at the beginning when you opened up this part of the podcast in the segment, when you talked about we're not perfect. We're not perfect. And in this area, we are being seen as protectionists in dairy, for good or for bad. We have interprovincial trade barriers that not only hurt us internally, but also make it difficult for foreign companies to operate. I know, because I work with a lot of American investors who tell us about, and we make it really difficult from the regulatory perspective. And now we're hearing in the media, Canadians worried about Americans investing in critical minerals. And somehow we're worried that, they're going to be taking us over. So we do, and of course we did the EV 100% on EV tax credit, and we say that we're the free traders. No. When it suits us, we use measures. We use tariffs too. So when others do it, or others react to what they perceive as lack of access to our market, I think we need to listen to what they're saying, and we need to meet them somewhere halfway if we don't want to end up with exactly what you both have said, with basically take it or leave it kind of deal.
The recent visit by Mark Carney and Minister LeBlanc, they went down and they were talking about, they were there for a deal on steel, aluminum, and energy. And they floated the idea of Keystone XL again, which Donald Trump's already signed an executive order to allow the cross-border portion to happen. But I can tell you that in Ontario, the fact that auto was not mentioned was duly noted and caused a panic. Do you think that they're kind of walking away from the auto industry, as you hear Howard Lutnick saying, no, you can have parts, but we're going to take all the assembly? You hear about Jeep deciding they're not going to move Stellantis putting the Jeep Compass in Illinois instead of in Brampton, Ontario. General Motors moving some production to the United States as well. Do you think that they're saying, okay, we don't have cards to play here? I think we do have cards to play, but do you think that they're maybe saying, well, we can get a deal on this, and if we have to give up that, so be it?
See, that's the problem with sectoral negotiation. When we isolate our negotiations to each sector, we don't have the cards to play to push back on Donald Trump. The reality is Donald Trump wants to suck Canadian manufacturing back into the United States. I think everyone's acknowledged that. He has said that very clearly. That's his long-term goal. How do we push back? Well, let's give the Americans what they need to make a deal that brings predictability and certainty back into our bilateral relationship. But if we're doing it on a sectoral basis, we're going to get killed at the negotiating table. Do I believe that the Carney government is abandoning the auto industry? Absolutely not, and we shouldn't. And I believe Doug Ford is going to make sure he doesn't do that. But the reality is we need cards to play. And right now, I don't see us putting those cards on the table. We've talked about critical minerals. You know, the government has a big decision to make. It's coming up. The Anglo-Teck merger. Teck Resources is the largest critical minerals miner in Canada. And we could lose that miner to this merger because the head office would end up in London. And who knows what happens to the jobs. And the concern is that the production from Teck Resources will eventually flow to the European Union as opposed to the United States. And don't kid yourself, the Trump administration is keenly aware of that dynamic. Again, talking about irritants, let's not put another irritant, on the radar for the Trump administration to go ballistic on. Let's make sure we handle this in a way that preserves our bilateral relationship while at the same time ensuring that Canada remains open for business.
One of the many irritants that I had with the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act was they had a section in there on critical minerals to have all the processing done in the United States. It's like, wait a minute, those are our critical minerals. Why are you saying it's got to be done that way? So look, we have irritants back and forth. Part of the reason I talk about our irritants is that most of my colleagues in the media will only talk about what the United States has done. We all know what the United States has done. Sometimes we've got to look at ourselves. We'll close with the last couple minutes going back to something we talked about earlier. Strategy. You're both smart people. You've both been involved in these sorts of things, both advise governments and industry. What's your advice for the next 2 months or until the end of the year, Louise? What's your advice for getting us to the place we need to be, where our economy is not constantly feeling like we're under threat?
So, I can't go back. Huh? I can't say what I wish we had done different. No. No. I mean, we have to deal with what we have now. I think I totally agree. The dangers of signing a deal. For example, on aluminum, we know they have no choice, right? We have a distinctive competitive advantage on aluminum. They recognize that there's no way they can replace our aluminum. They know that, and it would take them years. And even if they tried, it would be very difficult. We have water, we have energy, we have everything you need to do aluminum. So the issue is, if we get a deal on aluminum, then what's the leverage on the other sectors that we don't have as much leverage, right? So I totally agree that the way you get across the finish line is you have to deal with everything all at once. You can't leave the tough. You know what they say in negotiation, that the easy stuff gets done first, and then you've got the last stuff. Well, we cannot do all the easy stuff and tuck them away and sign deals and then be only left with the things we don't have leverage with. So I think we need at this point, I think we could have gotten the bigger deal earlier on. I think now we've been put in a queue. And they're not as much in a rush, but I think we need to go back. We need to convince them that it's important that they settle this. They need some stability as well. They've got the midterms next year, and I think we try to go and we deal with every single sectors, and we get as good a deal as we possibly can get. And that's I think this is the only choice we have.
Ed, your thoughts? What would your advice be if you were sitting down with Prime Minister Carney and his team later today?
I would remind him of the profound asymmetry in our bilateral relationship. We are the mouse sleeping next to the elephant. When the elephant rolls over, we better be careful. And I would suggest to him that we take note of the comments of Ambassador Pete Hoekstra, who signaled that the U.S. had a desire to do a bigger deal, a grander bargain. A grander bargain allows us to bring into play all of the key assets that the United States has a key interest in, but has no guarantee on. And we've talked about some of those. We've talked about defense and continental security and critical minerals. We could talk about cross-boundary water management, which a lot of people don't talk about. We could talk about food security and potash. And just there's a whole waterfront of issues and assets we can bring to the table if we broaden out our negotiations into a grander bargain. So I would say to Prime Minister Carney, look at the grand bargain. It is our one opportunity to really get this right. And let's make sure that when we negotiate this and complete negotiations, we've baked into that agreement much tougher enforcement provisions so that neither party can simply bail out on the whim of a prime minister or a president, that there are legislative bake-ins, lock-ins that are in place, that we have tougher enforcement process, dispute resolution that is timely, that doesn't take years to resolve. And I think if we open our minds to that possibility, we have a real opportunity to get this right.
Ed Fast, Louise Blaise, thank you both very much. Great conversation, and thank you for letting me pull from your respective minds for what we need to do. Full Comment is a post-media podcast. My name's Brian Lilly, your host. This episode was produced by Andre Proulx. Theme music by Bryce Hall. Kevin Libin is the executive producer. Please hit subscribe, leave us a review, and tell your friends about us. Thanks for listening. Until next time, I'm Brian Lilly.
Here's that clip from Canada Did What? I Promised You. 2 years later, he was still opposition leader, and he lost again to the Pearson Liberals. Despite this, Diefenbaker doesn't resign as leader of the Progressive Conservatives, which put the party in an awkward situation that hasn't really happened before. The typical rules of a Canadian political party were that you stayed leader until you died or resigned. And if you lost twice in a row, you were supposed to do the honorable thing and step aside. But Diefenbaker just didn't, prompting the party to take the unprecedented step of forcing a party convention in Toronto for the singular purpose of crowbarring Diefenbaker out of the leadership. Diefenbaker shows up, pretends everything is fine, and gives a finger-wagging speech chastising his fellow party members for their disloyalty.
I followed this party when I didn't agree with policies. And I gave loyalty to leader after leader, because I believe that there is no other way.
He's politely cheered by the assembled Conservatives and then abjectly humiliated in their subsequent leadership vote. On the first ballot, Diefenbaker gets a distant 5th place, and even then he refuses to admit defeat. If you want to hear the rest of the story, make sure you subscribe to Canada Did What? Everywhere you get your podcasts.